Alrighty. So without further ado, we'll start this media availability off. Again, we'll start with a opening statement with our Vice President, Director of Athletics, Dave Hickey, and then move into Dr. Paul, and then we'll start with questions for Dr. Paul first after that. So Dave, welcome. Oh.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it very much. Good to see everyone. I know it's a little bit of a tricky time with the activities going on in town here with the fires. I'm actually at home watching the aircrafts come through and drop fire retardant. So I'm not too far from where it's all happening. So hope it doesn't come too much farther down the hill or I'll have to evacuate. I'm in one of those areas. So appreciate the time. And, you know, we wanted to get together and talk about our reentry process, our plan. We obviously are bringing some student athletes back, a very measured, very slow approach to bringing people back, one of the first entry backs to the campus. And we've put together a plan, I think that all of you have started to look through and seen, but we're obviously very optimistic and enthusiastic about bringing back some student athletes in small numbers to measure how we can continue and what way we'll continue with the process. But just as the president has stated on numerous occasions, you know, he has plans to, our plan as a university is to bring back students, you know, faculty and staff in a very healthy and safe manner, and eventually to be able to open to a greater degree the entire campus. You know, it's a plan that has been worked on with administrative staff, our medical professionals on staff and in the community. We've had involvement from our student athletes, students, you know, all levels, coaches, and our staff. So been a very monumental effort by a number of people to get us to this point, all under the guidance of our university's reentry team. We have a reentry team here in athletics, but obviously we've been working in conjunction with the overall general university's reentry team and the leadership there. So been very appreciative and thankful to Dr. Robbins, President Robbins, for his leadership through this time. It's been a very much of a challenge, but you know, being out front, talking about it, being on the cutting edge, the very transparency, the town hall meetings that have occurred, you know, really, again, trying to share as much information as possible and about how important and impactful this is to the Wildcat community and to the community of Tucson. So we're focused on what we can control and what we know. That is to provide a safe and healthy environment for the return to campus. It's a comprehensive plan, but again, it's a measured plan. It's also a fluid and flexible plan. As we learn more information from health professionals, as we continue to monitor both this local landscape, but the national landscape, we will certainly be taking that into strong consideration and making any adjustments that we need to, that is according to, again, to that kind of guidance. But we'll always follow, you know, health professionals' guidance, national, state, local protocols, guidance, mandates, as well as the strong guidance of our university and the university community. So with that, I'll pause and we'll let Dr. Paul. We've got great leadership from Dr. Paul. He has been the person in charge, you know, really at the top of our effort from this medical team, and looking forward to hearing you, Steve.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you all here and to explain our plan a little bit, to clear some things up and hopefully give you an idea of how hard we've worked on this. And, you know, as Director of Athletics has mentioned multiple times, this is a privilege to start this reentry plan and to champion the efforts that Dr. Robbins and his team has done for the university as a whole. And I just want to reemphasize a couple of key points that's already been noted. The number one goal is the health and safety of our student athletes and staff. And the other big thing is that this is extremely fluid and flexible. So what you see today, depending on changes that happen and consultation with the experts, it could change tomorrow, because we're always able to move and be nimble to prepare for the safety of our students and our faculty and staff. So moving with that, we are not working isolated. We're coordinating all of these policies and everything. And man, the team's been working hard for months. I mean, almost since March, we've been going at this. So we're coordinating efforts between the federal, the state, the local health departments. We're coordinating with the Pac12 guidelines. We're in their medical construct for their policies, and we're also coordinated with the NC2A. All on the stage before maybe things are published and put out there. We're already reacting to it, and we're already in the know, and we're already making our policies based on where we think we're going. So it's a very important thing. And keep in mind that everything we're doing, you know, with the leadership of Derek Vandermeer, is we are working within the task force that the president has set up. And with his guidance, his medical background, his knowledge and experience and enthusiasm for this, and I'd say foresight for how he's planning to get us going, it's a great construct. And we have the honor and privilege to be the first group to test it. And I think that's the important thing here, is that we are going to start small, controlled, with an enormous amount of education and background to make sure we do this right, and move if we're not, and pause if we need to get it right. So that's the key things. And again, we're always going to stay attentive to the idea of the test, treat, and trace. So let me give you a little bit idea of how we're doing this. So already we have a group of 19, 20 student athletes on campus who have gone through our medical evaluation. We have specific protocols in place to check on their health related to COVID-19. We've already done the first round of testing on these student athletes, with the idea that Monday we can start doing a voluntary approach to getting their health back. You know, we have student athletes who have done nothing for 3 months, possibly, to people who are really at it. And we have to allow for a safe rollout to make sure everybody can get on par. So the volunteer workers are huge. What's really important is that we're working in a construct of small groups, 10 or less, adhering to the governor's mandate of that stage policy where we're at currently. So everybody's going to be, we call them a pod, and they're a group of 10 or less. They're going to stay there. They're not going to interact with the other pod. And I'll go through a little bit of what their daily routine is and some of the education we're doing, but we will keep building. And these pods don't really interact until we're mandated that we can do so based on the state, federal, Pac-12, and NC2A guidelines. So we're doing this all with foresight. I like to think of these pods as a bubble. And I always talk about that. If we can keep everybody in that bubble and we limit the contacts away from that in terms of unsafe contact, we can all move forward and limit the chance of anybody getting infected. And I'll also point out what we can do if somebody does. But let me give you an idea of some of the mitigation factors that we have vigorously put in place with signage, with education modules, with multiple presentations. So we're really emphasizing the physical distance. That's super important in terms of preventing this disease. So 6 feet at a minimum. Oftentimes when we're working out, breathing hard, et cetera, we're expanding that distance. We're asking everybody to wear a mask on campus, because that's another key thing in showing to reduce the infection rate. And then we're really, really pumping up the hand washing and disinfection protocols, not just for the student athlete, but for the facility and the campus as a whole. So everything's really being ramped up big time. We also are really implementing a daily wellness check, and there's a campus rollout of a beta version where you can do this online. But our student athletes, we're going to go one step further. We're going to actually monitor their temperature before they enter a facility, and then they're going to document whether they've had any of the symptoms of the COVID-19. So let me give you an idea of the daily routine. This first group, Monday, they're divided in their pods. They're going to report at the designated time. They're going to enter the stadium on the far east gate. They'll come through. They'll have their own individual basket with their own personal items, such as their water, whatever gear they might need, towels, individual, no sharing of equipment. They'll have hand sanitizers, and then they'll be spaced out, and the whole stadium is spaced out to allow them to do their workouts with our excellent strength and conditioning staff that Coach Johnson has put together. And they'll go through that for an hour, and then they're going to grab their food. It's grab and go, no interaction with that staff, and they're going to exit from the other side of the stadium at gate 2. And then we're going to clean, get prepared, start all over, and we're going to repeat this as each pod comes in. We're doing this in phases so that as we go on, and if we are safe to keep bringing more student athletes in, we'll eventually be doing more with weight training with the group that starts first, and then the other group comes in and starts doing the fitness training to kind of build. And the hope is that if we can get past these surges and we can open up a little bit more in the state, then when it's time, we can bring them together. As noted, we have a vigorous testing program, and we're actually partnering with a university testing program. So I'll talk about risk in a second, but all the risk athletes are going to be tested weekly. Everybody's getting an antibody test in the beginning, because we need that to make sure they don't need any further testing for their cardiopulmonary system. But that is the key there. A little bit about the risk groups. So we're mirroring what the Pac12 and NCAA are planning, and they talk about two different things. One is your contact risk, and the other one is your tier. So the contact risk really looks at, are you within 6 feet of somebody for less than 10 minutes? That ups your risk factor. If you're wearing a mask, it tempers it, so it's not as critical. Without a mask, that puts you at a higher risk. So if you think about our sports, at some point when we're scrimmaging and we're competing, we're at high risk. So we understand that. So that's why we're going to have vigorous testing throughout the Pac-12 and within Arizona. But everything we're doing in the meantime is to reduce that risk, at least these first stages, to low risk, and keep everybody in a bubble and keep them safe. And we fully are aware of what's going on locally. And we're going to adapt. We're going to revisit every week. We're going to look at the test results and make sure we don't have trends within our program. And we're going to be very flexible and very safe moving forward. I think I've covered most of what we're doing. Matt, I'm looking at you. Was there anything that I missed?
No, I think you've done a great job of really giving some context here, Dr. Paul, and I appreciate your time on that. We'll start with questions now for Dr. Paul. I know, Michael, you had your first raised hand that I saw. So we'll go with you first for a question for Dr. Paul.
Okay. My main question is, what is the availability of testing at Arizona, and how quickly can you determine the results of those tests? It seems like this is going to vary from campus to campus based on things that I've read and heard.
Yeah, the latter part I'll mention is absolutely correct. And currently each Pac-12 school is sort of working on what they can do within their own communities, such as working with their veterinarian group to get the tests and do it quickly. I'll address what we're doing in Arizona. So by partnering with the university program, we're in a unique position to have, I'd call them the rocket scientists of microbiology. So we're going to be actually looking at different testing models, and we're going to validate what models are going to work and what will work well, all with the idea, there's 3 points to a good test: speed, cost, and reliability. And usually if you talk to a microbiologist, you can get best of 2 or 3. We're shooting for 3. And so we're going to be testing different protocols. But to directly answer your timing, the worst in terms of turnaround time is 7 to 10 days, maybe for the antibody. And that's usually if they have to run a second a phase on it. But we're looking at everything more rapid. What we're going to be doing next week, we're looking at a turnaround time of hopefully within 48 hours of when the test is submitted to the lab.
Sure. And I don't know if you specifically had addressed this previously when you mentioned, what you would do if there's a positive case. I know there is a list of protocols in the document that you guys are working on, but there have already been some positive cases at other schools. So let's just say that, football players are arriving, one of them tests positive for a COVID-19. What happens to that player?
It's a great question, Michael, and I have to tell you about the fluidity and the flexibility of our system. So it depends on the testing. So if they get tested before entry, that means previous exposure. We have protocols based on the CDC for that. There's either a time-based one or a test-based one, and we can do both. If they are negative initially and all of a sudden they test positive, that really starts to alert us in terms of our other parameters of treat and trace. So those really kick in pretty aggressively. The beauty of our system that we see it is we're limiting people in these bubbles. So we can absorb a test, we can absorb a positive, we can isolate and protect that person and those people in the pod, and all the other pods are isolated and protected while we trace and address that positive and find out, it's complicated because it's symptomatic when, all that stuff. But like you said, we do have ample protocols based on that and based on the CDC guidelines.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Our next question was from Brian with Arizona Desert Swarm. Brian, you're on mute.
Dr. Paul, sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries.
I don't know if you're the person to ask or if Dave is, but if there are positive tests, is there a protocol where you guys are going to, I'm assuming, comply with HIPAA and not identify players, but will be listing like a daily, this is how many tested positive type thing?
We'll probably answer it with two perspectives, one the medical and one the administrative, but we're lockstep, okay? So it's super important, especially when you have small groups coming in. We don't plan to share any of our testing until we get a lot of numbers and we can give you data that tells you something important if we need to, because that very nature, it's too sensitive. We're not allowed to, first of all. Some of the testing is under a study protocol, but basically we just don't want it to happen because it doesn't need to happen in terms of trying to isolate who this person might be or whatever. So we're not going to try to publish any data in terms of specifics. And maybe when we get to a larger number of people here and it can't be identified or whatever else down to their protected rights and protected personal information, we may release some statistical information, but we're not planning to release as we go forward. Okay, Monday we have 2 tests, and then next week, Tuesday, we have 4 tests. We're really going to focus on those people with the test results more than we are going to focus on notification. Does that explain it to you?
Yes, thank you.
I don't know, Director of Athletics, Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. Obviously, we will be reporting to the health officials those positive tests so that they can be monitored and that data can be, pulled into the overall picture in our community. So, but we'll be communicating that way. But from that perspective, until there's an abundance of information, we wouldn't be reporting out on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any other questions in the queue here, so if anybody has a question for Dr. Paul, we'll take the raised hand here. Back up for the first time would be Michael Lev again. Michael?
Yes. The follow-up question is, what are you doing about where the players are living? Are they allowed to live in off-campus apartments while all of this is going on? Are they being encouraged to limit their interactions with people when they're not, on campus working out, that sort of thing?
It's a great question. And if you look at our colleagues throughout the country, everybody is addressing it differently, and not necessarily one way is better than the other. But our approach has been, like you said, it's first education. We're really stressing the bubble approach. And this first group that came in, they've already been living together in Tucson. And so that's why we think it's really important. This is really important how we roll through to what the university can expect to do down the road too, because if we can successfully do this and we don't have outbreaks or it doesn't get out of control or whatever else, we can demonstrate that this can be done successfully and we can move forward with this whole plan of President Robbins. But no, so we are encouraging, more or less, it's kind of like home isolation. So we're respecting that they shouldn't go out to do anything other than necessary things. They should wear a mask even if they're in close contact with their roommates. And if they stay within that bubble, we're all good. It's when you go out of that bubble, you have to go to the grocery store, or somebody knocks on your door and they don't have a mask on. Those kind of things are out of our control, and that's the hardest part to educate them on. I hope that explains it.
And I think I'd follow up back to what Dr. Paul said. There's a significant educational step that we take. This group comes in, they meet our medical professionals. We detail all of the process, but we also talk about behavior, in the community, their living assignments, where they are, how they should act, how important this is for all of us. It's our own personal responsibility to follow the guidelines and to help this so that we can continue to go, so we can play football, we can play other sports.
Yeah, I would just say too, from Coach Sumlin yesterday talking to his players, it's starting top down. And he spent a lot of time explaining to them that, if we're in a system and one guy goes down, the potential is to spread to the other people. So our ownership of this program is super huge. And I'll tell you, just looking at the faces on the Zoom with the team, I'm so impressed that these guys are taking this seriously. They're getting it. And as Coach Sumlin said, this is the new norm, and they're adapting, and they're doing a great job. I'm really hopeful for this rollout.
All right, our next question will be from Jacob here with the Daily Wildcat.
Hi, I remember at the last press conference, you mentioned that you were considering the idea of maybe a 50% capacity at the sporting events. Is it something that you've ever considered up until now?
Well,
You want me to go or Dave? Go
yeah.
Oh, just either one, whoever has the answer, I guess.
Well, let me just say, and then maybe Dr. Paul can specifically talk a little bit about our from a medical protocol and some social distancing things. We have not established a capacity. We're not at a point to do that. We're definitely studying what we can, how we would do it, and the type of guidelines and protocols that would be in place all throughout an athletic event if fans were to enter into the space. But we're not at a point where we really know capacity. Lots of things about and lots of hypotheses out there nationally, but we're just again right now focusing on how we would do it and what we can do. If we can get to 50, if we can get to another number, we'll get there, but we're not at a point where we know what that's going to be yet.
I would just add that just gives you an idea of the complexity of the planning of this athletics reentry team is doing. And Derek, who's been running it more or less, I mean, he's got our specific domains, and they're simultaneously creating 4 or 5 constructs on a what if scenario. What if we're at 10 or less? What if we're at 50 or more? And how do we bring back people safely? And so it's not for lack of thought, but it's lack of mandate and success in what we're doing first that's going to dictate where we go next.
All righty. Next question is from Jay Gonzalez.
Gentlemen, at what point have you worked out that what happens at the point that the team has to work, I'm talking specifically football, has to work closely together when they're practicing and they start scrimmaging? I mean, what's that going to look like when you're talking about these pods and these early workouts and whatnot? But have you guys figured out what it's going to look like when the team has to start practicing together in larger groups?
Yeah, Jay, we already have plans that we've made, assuming we move forward in a safe way. And so that goes back to the definition per the Pac12 of high risk or low risk contact. And so we understand that a sport like football or soccer or volleyball, they're considered a high risk because they're going to have close contact and they're probably not going to play with masks. You can't put a mask on a helmet and safely play. So that protocol is going to be, they're going to be tested more frequently. So they'll be tested weekly, and the expectation, I think we're moving towards the Pac-12. I don't want to say too much because it's not formalized, but we'll have safety measures in place that will, through testing, that will make sure that people are as safe as possible before a competition in these high-risk sports. So the testing gets ramped up. And the other thing you mentioned is the pod system keeps moving forward, and we can move into the bigger groups and shared equipment like locker rooms and weight gear. That means our plan is working, and that bubble concept of their responsibility to this and limiting their unnecessary risk outside of the campus is working, and that's a huge step forward too.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. So I know you have a commitment here coming up. So at this time, it looks like we got through kind of questions for Dr. Paul. So thank you again, Doc, for joining us on this. And then we'll move forward with questions for Dave. So thank you again, Doc Paul. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Thank you, Matt.
All righty. So moving on to the questions for Dave. Looks like first up would be Steve. Steve, go ahead. Steve, you're on mute.
You're talking, can you hear me now? You're talking specific about Arizona. I'm curious if you've talked to your colleagues just for background or information from them and seeing what they're doing, maybe how it applied to you. This is a time when kind of teams unite in a weird way to get and move forward.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good question. I'm on a call 3 times a week with the athletic directors with the Pac-12. A week on a more national level call with athletic directors, so we're exchanging information. The Pac-12 calls are very specific with our conference, talking about issues, the similarities, and quite frankly, the differences of each of our institutions and their locales and how we would manage those. But the Pac-12 has a health and safety group that's been very front and center on this nationally. quite frankly, one of the most respected groups out there in setting guideline and policy. So we have been liaisoning with them. So lots of exchange of information. It's very interesting because so many states and local municipalities have different requirements and different levels of infection rates. So there are nuances across the board with that, but lots of exchange of information. But as you've seen, wide variety of approaches on how to do this. I think most noticeably is the amount of athletes that come back at one time. We have elected to take a very slow and steady approach to this, a very controlled fashion. We think that's the right way to do it. And again, to remind everyone, we're only in voluntary workout mode right now. We aren't having practices. We're not really out on fields, with balls or playing football. These are just voluntary workouts inside of our facilities, closely monitored around fitness and conditioning, and strength and weight work, weightlifting work. So that's what we're primarily focused on.
Thank you.
All righty. Next up on the question queue would be Alec White with the Arizona Daily Star.
Hey, Dave. I had a question regarding international athletes and whether there were going to be any additional procedures for them from a travel perspective, getting them back on campus, if there was any extra measures Arizona's taking to kind of counteract maybe some of the difficulties they'll go through for traveling and getting back on campus.
Thanks, Alec. Yeah, we have a number of international student athletes, and we've begun to work. We've monitored this since the day they left campus of their locations, and so we are again in contact with them and work to bring them back to the United States. There are a number of levels to that. So we work our international office on campus. We have embassies that aren't open, travel documents that need to be approved. So each one is its own individual case, but we're working as a team, as part of our reentry team, is to address the needs of those international student athletes. I do think it will take longer for the international student athletes to get back and to come back, based on, again, their location now and what is permitted for their travel based on the country they're in, and then locale and how that is related to entering the United States. So lots of pieces to that, and will be challenging going forward.
All righty. Next question is from Caitlin Schmidt with Arizona Daily Star.
Hi, Dave. I'm wondering what the plan is if there are student athletes who are feeling uncomfortable about returning to campus or playing as numbers continue to rise or as we get closer to start time. Is there an option for them if they just aren't ready when school starts?
Yeah, of course. Right now, it's completely voluntary. Any student athlete that does not want to return to the campus or return to Tucson, that is certainly their decision. And as we go forward and we learn more about the status and the environment, we'll continue to allow the students to make those decisions that are in their best interest. Whether it's staff or it's students, there will be some that would prefer not to return. We want to, again, assure them when they do that they have a very safe and healthy environment. But we all know that's a very personal decision. And again, we'll work with each student athlete as they begin to go through those emotions. But we would respect that. If they were unable to return and weren't ready to return, we would respect that.
Does that mean there's a redshirt option for them if that's what they want to do?
Yeah, specifically what could happen, we'd have to go through the process with the NCAA. Depending on where they are, depending on the academic endeavors, all of those will play into their eligibility and how that would come on or how that may be impacted. So each student athlete is a very unique, has some unique circumstances. But again, we would respect their choice and we would do everything we can to maintain their ability during the year or beyond.
Justin, you had your hand raised, but then took it down, so I didn't know if you still have the question.
Yeah, Caitlin, her follow-up question was my question. But Dave, I was just wondering, how do you think the reentry plan will affect recruiting? or is that just based on the NCAA?
Date-wise, kind of, or just the process of recruiting, Justin?
Yeah,
or?
like when do you envision possibly maybe having recruits come on campus, or is that just up to the NCAA?
It's up to the association now, and again, all of us as members. The council has put a moratorium on that. Boy, refresh my memory now. They keep. I think it's July 30th, I believe. Is that where we are, Matt? Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So prior to that date, recruiting is on hold. Obviously, you can talk to recruits, but visits and travel and all those kind of things are restricted. We would, I think the recruiting process, when opened up, will change. People coming from different areas, how much contact they would have, the traditional visit may be altered, how much interaction you have with current student athletes, would probably change. It would be a modified recruiting, but too early to really speculate on that. We need to open that up. And again, we're hopeful that as things continue to progress, we can have those individuals begin to visit, and our coaches can start to embark on some level of travel to visit recruits, throughout the country.
Thanks, Dave.
Next question will be from Michael Lev.
Dave, you talked previously about, how big of a hit to the bank account, ending spring sports was, revenues being down, et cetera. I would imagine that all this testing that's going to take place is going to cost a lot of money. I'm just wondering, where does that money come from? Is that something that you've budgeted within the athletic department? Is that from the overall university budget? What's the source?
Initially, we are collaborating with the university, with our health sciences area. So some of that testing is a university-wide component. But we have budgeted, and we begin to forecast expenses as we move throughout the fall and the year regarding testing, and that is what we're building that into our active budget. So that is challenging under the circumstances with limited revenues and and the expenses that we do have. We've got to be very, very careful with that. But again, our health and safety, our testing is critically important as we bring people back into the environment. So that has quickly elevated to a priority within our budget.
Thank you.
Go back to Steve Rivera.
Dave, do you still anticipate the entire schedule being played?
We do. I'm optimistic, and that's the intention, is to play the entire schedule. We still have some time to decide on that. But it does appear, and again, talking to my colleagues around the country, that the plan right now is to continue to look for a full schedule of football. For us, that starts a week early. We're in as I call it, week 0 with Hawaii. So we are starting ahead of the majority of college football, where University of Hawaii will be traveling here to Tucson to play in the last weekend of August. So, but that is our full intention. Now, again, we still have some time, but I think over this next 30 days, there'll be a real focus on that. We have to make decisions if potentially the season and the number of games would be reduced.
And maybe just to follow real quick, how has this whole process since March felt for you? It's totally different for everybody, but you have a big monster ahead of you, and you're in one right now.
It's been it's been something else. It really has. It's amazing. The work. I know how our group. You think, hey, everybody's working remotely, and maybe we take our foot off the gas pedal a little. I think mentally, the mental fatigue and the amount of work that our group, our staff has gone through, it has been very taxing, because this doesn't ever end. It's hard to even say, hey, Friday and the day's over, because it goes all weekend long, and it just keeps going. Every day feels like Tuesday. You're just in the middle of the week. And I'm sure all of you feel that way to a degree. And every day feels like a week. Every week feels like a month. And we want progress, lots of planning. I think planning gets exhaustive when you can't execute, but just having good preparation has been very taxing, and a great deal of responsibility. This is very important. games and wins and losses. But again, we're talking about, people's lives, health and safety issues, and then also being part of the university and helping the university begin to open up and move back to some level of normalcy. We need that as a community. We obviously need it as a university, but we need that as a community here in Tucson for the university to begin to move forward and work. But it's been, I've said a couple times that, I think if we knew it was going to be this long, maybe we all should have taken a vacation right away at the first couple of weeks. It's been a long haul. Very positive, very optimistic. I'm enthused that we're able to, again, start to introduce some things very cautiously, very appropriately, and we hope that it continues to move in a positive direction.
Thanks.
All righty, our next question is from Ann Ryman with the Arizona Republic.
Hi, Dave. I'm wondering what changes you've made recently, just given the sharp spikes that we're seeing in Arizona in cases, kind of as you get ready to introduce the athletes back to campus. And then could you give us some color on how many student athletes can we expect to see next week on campus, and what sort of things will they be doing?
Sure. So obviously the last, several days, we're aware, we are constantly monitoring with our health team on campus, our university health team, the trends in Arizona. That's very important to us as we, again, evaluate all the information out there, and we'll continue to do that. We do it on a daily basis with our incident command team, bringing in those numbers and then evaluating those with the health professionals. So real-time daily information back on that. We believe our process is safe. We have testing up front. We can isolate when we have positive, if we have positive cases. We have the protocols and the guidelines in place to maintain order over any positive tests. So our approach is very methodical and very tempered, bringing back 20 athletes next week that will be able to go into the facilities. They're already on campus. They've been tested and are isolated now and being monitored. And then Monday will be the first day they'll enter our facilities with a high scrutiny. And again, very small numbers, respecting social distancing, the right appropriate amount of supervising, but not an abundance of staff and coaches there. So it's really very controlled. So, and again, we will grow on that. As that is successful, we bring in our next group. So there'll be 20 next week. The following week, we would introduce 30 more. So we'd have a total after that next week, 50. Then we would begin, as it continues to progress and we're positive, we would move to bring on approximately student athletes.
Do we have any other questions? We're through questions in the queue. So if anybody has any other questions for Dave, we're through all the queue questions as it is. So just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get it off. Alrighty. No takers on that. Thank you, Dave, for your time, and thanks to everybody for joining in on this time for our reentry plan availability.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again as we roll this out, as it kind of goes into motion.